Welcome to Milestone Moments, the show where we explore the journeys that lead to success. I'm Sheila Slick, your host and founder of 5 Milestones. In every episode, we will bring you insights from the minds of entrepreneurs, leaders, and experts who will share not just their expertise, but the milestone moments that have reshaped their journeys and led to significant achievements. So if you're looking for motivation, you're in the right place. Subscribe now and discover the milestones that mark the path to success. Welcome to another episode. I'm Sheila Slick, your host, and today my special guest is Jake Wysocki. Jake has trained hundreds in workshop facilitations at Fortune 200 companies, and then he left to bring that same methodology to the world of coaching. He now runs Intention Craft, where he builds 5-star group coaching programs for established experts. Welcome to the show, Jake.
Thanks for having me, Sheila. Great to be here.
Well, I normally love to start learning about why you started Intention Craft. What was that moment, that pivotal moment that led you to do what you're doing today?
Yeah. So for me, the biggest moment that really led to that was probably the most salient moment was a conversation with my wife. So I've been talking in general terms for a few years. I really loved my job. We can get into that if it's relevant before I quit. But I've been talking about I'll do my own thing at some point. And she asked me one summer, I think it was 2023. We both worked from home and I was popped upstairs to chat with her about something. She said, "So when are you going to do that?" I said, "Oh, I don't know, sometime in the next few years," the same standard answer. And thankfully, she pressed me on it. She said, "Okay, you've been saying that for a few years. So are you just going to keep saying that for a few years, or are you actually going to do something about it?" And she said, "Well, why not now? Like, why not just do that like this year?" I said, "Well, I don't know, money. I love my job. I don't really want to change." She's like, "Okay, are those real reasons? Like, go check the money thing. That's not the real reason. Like, we can live off of my salary for now and you can figure it out." That was the case. And it ultimately, we determined there is no reason not to do it now. So that's when I gave my 3 months notice in October of 2023. And then I left at the beginning of 2024.
So, of course, you left me with a cliffhanger. What were you doing?
Yeah. So I was working for a big Fortune 200 company, like you mentioned at the top, helping train people within my large company, not my large company, the company I worked for, how to train them on how to do design thinking from primarily like a building organizational capability perspective, if you will. And what that looked like was our primary offer. I talk about it now as an entrepreneur, as an offer, but that's not obviously how we thought about it in the corporate world. But the primary offer that we had was a 12-hour training that was about design thinking basics. And I'll explain what design thinking is in a second as well. Um, Over 1 week. So 3 hours, 4 days in a row, all virtual or usually virtual, with 24 people. And we delivered 12 to 16 of those as a team throughout the year. We did other things too, but that was like the main thing. That was kind of like our flagship, if you will. And so let me talk about design thinking for a second, because people may say, "I don't know what that even means." Design thinking, I describe it as it's a capital D designer, like someone who went to school for capital D design, but you're using their mindset and their toolkit by typically non-capital D designers who didn't go to school for design. So the mindset would be human-centric is like the simple way to describe that. Like, think about who is using the actual product you're making, the process you're developing, that whatever you're doing, there's humans involved somewhere. Think about them, and that's what you should be focusing your efforts on, not just how do we actually make this happen, but why are we trying to make it happen? Why do they care? Things like that. And then the toolkit is often personified by like sticky notes, but it doesn't have to be. It's more structured exercises in general. Sticky notes are a great way to do that, but it can be any kind of structured exercise. And what I love about this is it really combines I'm an engineer by schooling, at least. I have an engineering degree, though I never was like a actual engineer. But that process side mixed with the human side is what I love about design thinking. So that kind of is a little bit of the background. Happy to pull any other threads if you got them.
And that's what you're doing today with your coaching programs?
Yeah. So actually, I can fill in a few more beats here. The first thing I wanted to do, that I started doing when I first quit for about the first 9 months, and then I pivoted to what I'm doing now, was helping millennial parents live regret-free through workshops that I had designed for my wife and I to use to figure out things kind of like you should quit your job. Now, that decision didn't come through one of those State of the Unions, is what we call them. But bigger picture thinking is what we use those for 3 times a year. We have like a half day that we just do ourselves, and we talk through again big picture things. Quadrant two, if you're familiar with like Stephen Covey thinking, like those big things that are hard to find time for in the day to day, but can really make a big impact. And I thought to myself, I love my friends, and if anyone's out there listening, I love you guys, but they could use just a little more intention with their life. And I want to help people do that. And so I started down that path, started to get a little bit of traction. But the next kind of milestone that pivoted me to what I'm doing now is I met a few people along the way at Craft and Commerce, which is Kit's in-person event, which is really great. It's a whole nother topic. I could talk about that all day. Really love that event. But I met a few people who knew my background, and they said, Jake, I'm freaking out. I committed to doing some in-person coaching for some of my clients, and I don't know what to do. Can you just help me? And so I ended up helping them. I had notes everywhere. I was really loving it. And I realized I really miss doing this. And that's ultimately the main kernel that kind of pivoted me back to what I'm doing now. So to kind of put a bow on that, what I do now is what I do now is I actually build group coaching programs for people who have a lot of expertise, but don't know how or don't want to spend the time actually structuring and developing a program to help people transform in some way. And it's all using that design thinking methodology and kind of mindset and facilitation skills and all those sorts of things.
So, what I'm loving about your story is how you've been pivoting. Seems like you experimented and touched a pain point that as a millennial parent, you're looking for that balance and you're looking, to live that life regret free. Now you've got me thinking, am I living regret free?
Yeah. I mean, it is so true. And if I can take a detour here for just a second, because it is a big part of why, like, so I called my company Intention Craft, and it still applies to what I do, because I've kept coming back to throughout my life, like, let's just be intentional. Like, what are we actually trying to do here? And that's why I like this zooming out time. And so like the kid thing is absolutely true. So I have at the time of this recording, a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old. And if I stop and think about it, my 8-year-old is already basically halfway done with their time that they're going to spend with me. And that may be even like a little optimistic, because I'm assuming when they become teenagers, they're going to start wanting to spend more and more time with their friends and less time with dad, even though they're going to want to spend time with me, hopefully, right? I think I'm laying a good foundation. But like, it really puts into stark contrast, like, what are we actually doing here? Everybody, like, what are we doing? And so that tied in with one of the decisions. I quit my job without doing a side hustle. So I made the decision. I didn't want to take extra time in the evenings or in the weekend away from my kids. And I didn't feel good because I really loved my job. Maybe if I was like bitter about my job, I might have not cared so much to work during like regular work hours, but I didn't want to do that. And so that was part of the decision. It's like, well, what is like truly important? And the regret-free thing, I didn't mention this, and I'm happy to dig into this if you want, but I love any opportunity I can mention this. I'd love to mention it. In 2015, after my wife and I got married, we actually quit our jobs to travel for a year. And the decision factor there was literally, we asked ourselves the question, will we regret not doing this? We were looking at doing just like a month off, which at the time was also like huge because we were both in corporate America, and that's like a ton of time off. And we said, we have an opportunity. Will we regret it? The answer was, yeah, I think we'll look back and we'll regret it. So it's really hard to kind of project into the future, but you make some assumptions and then you figure out what decisions now will hopefully lead to living regret free. Brief aside from an entrepreneurial perspective, by the way, trying to sell something that is about living regret free is really difficult, because that is such a long time frame to literally have my promise of I will help you as a millennial parent live regret free. You have to be on your deathbed looking back and say, yeah, Jake did actually help me live regret free. So that was a little bit of a big scope, but the message still came through, I think. But anyway, I digress.
So,
Can I jump on something you just mentioned that actually will help us, pivot wherever I'm happy to follow you wherever, but you were mentioning Intention Craft and you said perfection. And this is a big thing. I actually did some work on, I guess what would be called like my premise, if you will. I was working with another guy I met along the way on my journey. And I came as I'm working through my thoughts on perfection. This is something I see with a lot of people who try to build programs. They are worried that it's not good enough and they try to build everything and they're trying to make everything perfect. Like, please don't do that. We can talk tactics and some of my recommendations there. We can go deeper on that. But what I realized in talking through this was my view is perfection is, I think a lot of people know this or will certainly agree with this, but perfection should never be the goal. But I think excellence is the goal. And those two things are different because perfection implies that there is a point that you can stop and you're saying, this is like, I've reached the pinnacle or whatever. And I don't believe that in general with most things. I'm sure there's a few exceptions that maybe prove the rule. But excellence, I like the framing of excellence because it's not about getting it right. It's about caring enough to keep making it better. And that's how I've been thinking about it and trying to teach people. You don't have to start perfect, just like you were talking about, but it'll continue to get better and better and better, and it will be excellent. And that's what you need. You don't need perfection, you need excellence. So anyway, that's like one of my recent soapboxes that I've had on my mind lately.
So you named your company Intention Craft. What's the meaning behind your name?
Yeah, so I'll share a little bit. There's a book and also a TV show called His Dark Materials, or it's a series of books actually. The Golden Compass is probably the most known of those. And there's a HBO show that we were watching at the time when we were talking about this idea. And I love this concept of being intentional. And there's a physical machine called an intention craft. You think and it will take you there, basically. And we're like, oh, that's interesting. Intention, like that obviously stuck out like a lightning rod because intention's always been important. And craft in that sense was more about like the craft, like the vehicle, the craft. But I love this concept of craft because it implies that it's also something you're building that you can there can be like craft to me evokes like woodworking and things like that where yes, there is art, but there's also technique and there's better ways to do it. There's established ways to make your woodworking a certain way, and there's certain like patterns you can follow. And there's an artistry to it. But intention, just being intentional in general, thinking about where you want to go before you try to go there, even if you don't end up exactly where you want to go, intention's been really important. Then the craft piece is, it's not all art. There is technique, but there's also a mix of art and technique. So that's kind of why that resonated with me, besides the lightning bolt of the idea specifically from that show I mentioned. So there you go. There's my story.
What one key piece of advice would you give to someone that's listening to this episode today that perhaps is in that situation that you were, comfortable, complacent, and whether or not they leave their job, they had that vision or that desire to try something new and be intentional about it?
I love that. Okay, so for me, the biggest thing that probably comes to my mind is like a core tenet of design thinking, and it applies to lots of things. And it's if you are curious about something, find some way to go test that idea. Now, I tested my idea when I left just to draw a line because my wife and I had been doing these State of the Unions ourselves, and I knew it worked for us. That was the test for me. But whatever it is for you, think about how can I go try that? And there's a book I read recently from Jim Collins, who's most famous for Good to Great. But there's another one of his books called Great by Choice. I believe that's the one. And he talks about firing bullets before cannonballs. And the metaphor here, which I think will be really useful, is imagine you're on an old-timey ship or whatever on the sea, like a wooden ship, and you have only so much gunpowder to fire, a cannonball and a little bit of extra, but you can't fire multiple cannonballs. So you're going to have to be really lucky to hit that ship you're trying to sink with a cannonball. The better way to do it is to fire a few bullets to see if you hit that, if you're on the right trajectory, and then you can aim, and then you're much more likely to actually be successful at whatever you're trying to accomplish. So the metaphor here is the bullets are low risk, low effort, and there might have been a third thing, but those are the two big ones for me. Is like, how can I try this in a way that doesn't take a ton of time, starts to get me some idea of am I on track before you go all in. So, and that will give you a lot of information. Do I like this? Does anybody care about this? Things like that. We could talk tactics for like entrepreneurial stuff, but that's kind of the core concept. So that's what I'll share on that front.
So, where can we connect with you online?
Yeah, definitely. So if you're interested in seeing more about what I do or getting a start on what that core of a program or a workshop might be, you can actually go to workshopwhy.com, and you can get a workbook, and you can actually schedule time with me if you want to talk through any kind of group experience you want to design. I'm happy to help give you my advice. That's workshopwhy.com.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Jake.
Thanks for having me, Sheila.
And thank you all for tuning in to another episode. Until next time.